This is great. How are you? Good, that's it. We're talking about energy. I just need to park the. We're talking about energy. We need energy, right? And as a Spiritist center, as a channel of the Spiritist doctrine, it's such an honor to talk about this great figure of Spiritism, Francisco Cândido Xavier, ex-Savior, right, in English, so also known as Chico. It is undoubtedly one of the greatest mediums that was ever incarnated here. Of course, we have other very great figures of Spiritism, starting with, of course, our own codifier of the Spiritist doctrine, Allan Kardec, but he was not a medium himself. In order for all the 5 books, the pillars of the doctrine, they were all channeled by mediums. Some of those mediums were like little girls, like 12 years old, 16 years old. It's like very pure-hearted, but like strong mediums. But they were anonymous, right? And that was like a basis of how the Spiritist doctrine was introduced. Even Allan Kardec, it's not his real name. He was an educator, a very important figure in France back in the days. And he wanted to abstain from fame and success. He had published many books. He was an educator, a philosopher, a scientist. He's got many talents and had a beautiful record of lifetime achievements. But when it came to the Spiritism, it was not a work of man. It was a work of the spirits. So all of the Spirit's book, it's questions and answers, but the whole thing was organized by this higher sphere of spirits. And Allan Kardec was the codifier. He was organizing. He was putting together. He was bringing all of that beautiful work in a way that you and I and everyone, and since 1857, right, when the Spirit's book was first published, that we have access to it, the information as crystal as clear as it could come. So, talking about Chico, it's a privilege because he was one of those figures that impacted a lot. Even though Spiritism was born in France, even though the first Spiritist documented facts started in Hydesville, New York, in 1848, I believe, and then Allan Kardec was already working with the tables, a lot of phenomena, Spiritist phenomena was going on in Europe, and it was going on all over the place, and that's the time that he scientifically put all the thing together and started. But then, not much later, even after he passed, Mr. Kardec, and Spiritism was established, was implanted, and there were Spiritist societies, similar to a Spiritist center, and this is like, Spiritist center is like a continuation of that. And then in Brazil, we had meetings. And by the way, Mr. Kardec, when he was putting together the Spiritist doctrine, he had all of those 1,019 questions on the Spiritist book. He was cross-referencing all of the questions with mediums all over the world, including Brazil, including everywhere. And he had very reliable sources to compare, and he would ask the questions to, say, 200 very sound mediums that they were known, and they would compare the answers, and if those answers were almost the same, or if they're the same, he would validate it and go on, and that's how he did his work. So Chico was born in Brazil, so this is not that's not our product. This was a presentation put together by the U.S. Spiritist Council I think it changed from council to federation. So we do have a federation for the country, United States, similar that we have in Brazil, and I think we established in other countries as well, in Europe, etc. So they put this together. I kind of summarized because our time is kind of limited, but we have a rich wealth of information. So he was born, that's his full name, right? Francisco de Paula Cândido Xavier. He was born on April 2nd, 1910, into a poor family, including 9 brothers and sisters in the suburbs of Belo Horizonte. Belo Horizonte, it's in the southeast region of Brazil, and it's one of a very wealthy states, very agricultural, very rich. That's where the Portuguese started to get the gold. They found the gold, and that's Belo Horizonte and São Paulo were the richest states in Brazil. They still, Minas Gerais actually, Belo Horizonte is the capital of Minas Gerais. And very, very, since the time of colonization, it's known there. So, but he came from a very poor family. So from early childhood, he was so different from other boys that his father thought that they brought home the wrong child from the hospital. So since he was a baby, he was already picked on, right? Although he needed to work from a very early age, Chico considered to be an indescribable blessing. When he was 5, his mother, Maria João de Deus, died, but Chico could see and talk to her spirit. So from age 5, right, he was already not just a medium. He was what we call an ostensive medium. His sensitivity was so high that he could not just sense, because some of us, we have mediumship of intuition. We kind of receive some messages and thoughts and all, but we don't necessarily see spirits or anything like that. Where we have the intuition, he could actually see his own mother. He received through automatic writing the book Letters of a Dead Woman, dictated by his mother. That was the first of over 400 books that he wrote. He didn't write. He channeled, because a medium does not write on his own. That's like the book that we just, Adriana just read here, Happy Life. This book here, it's psychographic. Another word for channeled, right, by Valdo Franco, but it is written by the spirit Joana de Angelis. And so the spirit is the author. It is a way of a communication to us, right? We're benefiting from it. We're the audience of this. But because there is, we not all of us have that sensitivity to speak with spirits, because and there is, I'm going to just open a parenthesis here, that there is a lot of stigma that, spiritists are people from the devil. They talk to the dead, right? I'm not making this up, because that's how I was raised, very Christian family, very traditional, and in some ways kind of orthodox. But it is pretty much out of ignorance that we have that conception, and nowadays we still have that conception. So it's not that we talk to the dead, we talk to the living. The thing is that we are being a spirit, we're talking to another spirit. It's the only difference is that this spirit here is vested in clothes. My body is just clothes, and then I pass on or change clothes, come back again, and that's how it is. It's just envelope. But it's the communication, so nobody is dead. There is no death, right? There is only a changing of circumstance. But we need them so much. Even in our technology and our inventions, we don't invent anything. Our greatest inventors, our greatest philosophers, our greatest thinkers, our greatest scientists, they're all inspired. Why do you think that the next day somebody come up with a great idea? That was an idea. He already existed. They're just trying to make us evolve. Let us help our brothers on earth that they can move faster with progress. Chico's first Spirits meeting took place in May 7, 1927. That's how young he was. So he was born in 1910, right? He was 17 years old. 17 years old, already having meeting. 2 months later, on July 8, 1927, he started to exercise his mediumship publicly at the age of 17. In 1931, Chico saw his mentor, the Spirit Emmanuel, for the first time. He was, even though he was and now this references to so many books about his life, right? He was, even though he saw his mom, even though he could see spirits and all, but when he first saw that his mentor, he was very scared. Not in a bad way, but scared. So in those early days, Emmanuel asked Chico if he was really willing to use his mediumship for Jesus. Emmanuel revealed to him, we have something to accomplish. For a starter, 30 books. Okay, 30 books. Just to start. Chico responded, to publish a book is very expensive, and I'm poor. I'm going to win the lottery? No, replied Emmanuel. The books will come through unexpected ways. So indeed, the first book, Poetry from Beyond the Grave, was published in 1932 by the Brazilian Spirits Federation. So that was actually the first book that he was publicized, because the first book was the one with his mom, right? That was the first book, Letters of a Dead Woman, dictated by his mom. And then later on they published that one too. So, in 1947, Chico had already published the 30 books. Okay, mission accomplished, right? Chico said to Emmanuel, well, we have finished our task. Not quite, replied Emmanuel. Now we will start a new series of 30 books. So by 1958, he had published 60 books. Chico asked Emmanuel, have we finished our task now? Emmanuel answered, the mentors of the higher plane told me that we have to publish 100 books. Okay, so that was the goal. Time passed. When they had accomplished that number, Chico asked Emmanuel again about their commitment. Chico, you shouldn't be worried about acting and working in such a hurry. Your present reincarnation was transferred to benefit the Christian spirit's principles. Very disappointed, Chico complained. Then, do we have to work on the reception of messages and books for my entire life? It's like, is that what am I going to be doing the rest of my life? Is that all? Yes, there is no other way, said Emmanuel, right? What if I don't want to? What about my free will? It's kind of rebel a little bit. Come on. Okay, that's a good thing. That's the good answer. If you refuse, the mentors responsible for this work will have sufficient authority to remove you from your current physical existence. It's like, what?
Isn't that a death threat?
That's a death threat, right? That's like, okay, maybe you're not going to wake up tomorrow. Well, that might happen. That was part we talked about here, and I think I had two series back to back. We talk about when we discarnate, what happened to us, and we go to the spiritual world. And once we are received there, the first thing that we do is like a revision. We do like a revision. How, let's see how you lived, and everything comes together. Oh yeah, we have a plan. We had a plan. We go back. We revise the plan. Oh, stuff didn't go so well. And, okay, so let's replan. That's what we call the reincarnation, right? So when we reincarnate, we had already gone through so many workshops, many intellectual, spiritual, and psychological enhancement of what we did wrong so we can do better. But we replan everything. So in Chico's reincarnation plan, he had already all of this already prepared. Everything he had already out of his free will. So it's not like they were just, surprise, surprise, here you got to do 30 books, another 30 books. So, but God used his messengers in such a sublime and such a easy way that we are not to be living a double life, right? Right now we're supposed to be living this life, and we come back here, we have a complete forgetfulness. We erase everything. So everything that happens when we are sort of like in the spirit, like if you go every night, if you're a good dreamer, if you like to dream, if you're like, I dream a lot, and sometimes you do go and you receive a lot of advices, you come back, it's like, wake up, hey, you're forgetting stuff. So wake up. When we wake up the next day, we're kind of more inspired, we know we're more on track with things, because all of this is already planned that we did for ourselves. So from then on, Chico dedicated his life to work that he referred to as designs from above. Even though he had only completed lower school, the spirits of discarnates dictated the text to him through his mediumship, and he published more than 400 books. It's just a little over 90 years old when he discarnated. I think it was 92, 94, in 2002. But he was a man that worked every day. If you try to put together 400 books in a lifetime of a person, it's a lot of work. It's not like he was, even though he was receiving, so the spirits were dictating, it's not just like writing what's coming. It takes a lot. It takes a lot because a spiritual communication, even though he was very prepared, it takes fluidical, it takes balance, it takes a harmony between this incarnated spirit and a spirit that comes with a mission. And look at the mission, and we're talking about this today, but this is like basis of, Spiritism. This doctrine had really transformed many, many people, and we're talking about in the Christian way, in a way of transforming lives. And this is a great mission, and that's why Spiritism is so large in Brazil, because it started with a very, very solid foundation. And Emmanuel is one of those spirits that he lived on the time of Jesus. He was a senator. He met Jesus, but he had so much pride, and he had so much going on for his life that he pretty much passed on the opportunity to be a follower of Jesus back then. But later on, within his reincarnations, he made it back, and he was. This is one of a very, we're talking an apostolic mission, of those disciples of Jesus. This is pretty much one of those type of works. Phases of psychography. So the mediumship head of Chico and the purpose of his mission had three phases, and that's how the books that he wrote with Emmanuel and many other spirits had those three phases. So the first phase was called the call, right? So it was composed of poets and renowned literary names. The second phase was the enlightenment. This began with the release of books that complemented the Spiritist codification. The works of Emmanuel then intensified with the dictation of André Louis' works. Our brother Al talked last week about this first book dedicated to Chico called No Solar, which is a spiritual colony where when he passed, he was a doctor, he passed, he gives us the accounts like a testimony, what happened after he discarnated, that he was in a lower region for about 8 years, and then he was helped, and they brought him to this colony called No Solar. By the way, it's in this book, they say it's right above Rio de Janeiro. There is one. And we have many colonies, spiritual colonies. In the United States, we have many colonies and so on, all over the place, because we need to have like a safe port to arrive, right? It's a place of enlightenment. knowledge. And because our incarnated world, it's so close to our spiritual world, it's like we're so connected, these colonies are within our spiritual atmosphere. So that's why that colony in Brazil was close to Rio. So the third phase was called the consolation. And in this third phase, Chico dedicated his life to utilizing the aptitude as medium to bring comfort to as many people as possible. He started with relaying of messages from family members who had crossed the frontiers of death after the famous TV shows Pinga Fogo. So he was not very known. Nobody knew much about Chico, but his work was so full of truth and so much consolation, so much hope, and there was no denial. That was the works of, the people who had passed. And they invited him to come to this TV show, and after this TV show, this program, that they kind of, like a round table, many journalists and other several figures, and it's like questioning and kind of trying to understand what's going on and if the person is for real or not. So in the first phase, the call, he's brought Poetry from Beyond the Grave. That was a book that was published in 1932 and contained 259 poems. It had 400 pages. And it revealed to Xavier by 56 deceased Brazilian poets. That many poets. And it is a fantastic book. Some of the renowned literary names were Afonso Guimarães, Amarneiras, etc. Very, very renowned poets. The second phase, which was called the Enlightenment, includes 132 dictated works, a third of Chico's psychographic output. So this is fantastic. Amongst those books, there's these 5 books that it was dictated by Emmanuel. I think we have it here, right next to. So this, and I'm reading I read twice already Renunciation. I probably read twice most of these 5 books here. Right now I'm reading the Paul and Stephen. These are fantastic reading. You have them here. And those 5 books from Emmanuel, it gives us, it brings us back on time, on the early Christians, and how these people had to go through the troubles, that they were burned in the Colosseum, and they were, they had so much persecution, and it gives accounts of Emmanuel's lives, how he came back from a senator to a slave, and so on. Very, very good. So that was gives a good account of the history of Christianity. In the second phase still, he had the works of André Luiz. And André Luiz had 37 dictated works, which is 9% of Chico's work. And he is like a reporter. So he's like André Luiz. He used to be a doctor when he was incarnated, and when he passed, he was given the mission of bringing to us how it is to be living there. And he had access to many, many different places, very, very enlightened places, to the most dark place, like going in missions in places like, it's pretty much, if there is a description of hell, that would be pretty much the places that he went. But in missions of love. And that's the whole point of all of these works, is how the power of love, charity, of trying to, spirits that have been in denial for many, many years. You and I, we could have had lives that we made so many bad choices, or we have been crossed by so many people, and we could have committed crimes. Most of the times we recover from it. We go back and we repair that. But there are a lot of times that we got stuck because the trauma is so severe sometimes people did so much to us that we had revenge and vengeance and hate, and the power of hate is so strong that it's hard to free from it. And in these works, for instance, there are so many examples of how we help each other, and how we can have tolerance, how much we grow when we are helping, when we understand, and most importantly, when we forgive. It is fantastic. It is one of the most gifted part of Chico's work, in my opinion. So the third phase was the consolation, and that was one of the phases that Chico was known in, not just in Brazil, but all over the place, as the consoler. Many mothers who had lost their children, and sometimes violent accidents or some unexpected situations. And he was receiving letters, and he had letters for those moms, those family members, and he would work 24 hours around the clock just to make sure everybody had access to this. And he wrote many books, and that was another beautiful phase of his works. You cannot read that. This is just talking about some of his power and his dedication. So poor, he never really benefited from the work, from the proceeds from those books. He wrote over 400 books. Some of those books were like bestsellers, and they had and he would bring some, he would bring some profit, and all of this was donated to orphanages, places, hospitals, and charity institutions that they were helping the people. He never kept any of this, any of the proceeds of the books for himself, and he was still very, very poor and helping his family raise those 9 children that we talked about. So this is the type of mediumship that he had, because when we're talking about mediumship, there are different types of mediums, and there is different types of aptitudes, sensitivity that we have, that we manifested. So he had all of this. He had the physical phenomena, which is a materialization and healing, meaning like he had that type of energy that he was able to have a spirit that was visiting him to just materialize. Not just the power of the spirit. He had to have some special in his biology and in his own spirit. He had to have some elements and some energies that would make it possible for that spirit to actually materialize. Very, extremely rare. And that's one of the things that Emmanuel, his mentor, told him, Chico, I know that, and he has done some experience, and he documented that. Emmanuel told him, look, it's a very interesting thing that you're doing that and you're experiencing that. But we have a lot of books to write, so we have to get with the program. So don't get too happy about that. So let's move on. And he had the healing, right? So he also healed people just with his magnetism. In the intelligent phenomena, he was a clairvoyant. He had clairvoyance. So he saw, right? He saw his mom since he was 5 years old. So he actually saw spirits. Like right now, there's about 358 spirits right here with us right now. And he would be able to see every one of them. He would talk to us as I'm talking to you right now. He will be talking to you. At the same time, he will be talking to those 358 spirits that are here right now with us, watching this talk and paying a tribute to Chico right now. And some of them, because it's not just a social event, right? We are in need of healing. We are in need of a pickup. And he had such a beautiful heart that he would probably not need to say much words. Just a look, just a smile, just sharing his spirit. It was good enough to heal and help those people. He had cloudy audience. That means that you can actually hear. I used to have that. I don't have that anymore. I don't know what happened. But I guess I was so scared of that, and I kind of, but it will come again. Like you actually hear voices, And you know that there is like, unfortunately, there's this stigma. Like if you start hearing voices, like you're kind of going schizophrenic, or you're going crazy, you're going like, you know, we have to go to a mental hospital because, you know, you hear voices. This is such a natural thing that we have. This is actually a gift. The problem is what we do with that, right? In my case, that happens in such an early age that if we're not educated about it, we can really get scared about it, or just be so open that, you know, there is the good spirits and the bad spirits, right? So it's just like people. You have to know the content. You have to know what kind of fruit that you're getting to, so you know the tree. So he also had, of course, most common psychographic automatic writing, and he was a master of that. And that's how he wrote over 500 books. This is just an example of one message he received in English. This man had no education whatsoever. He had probably first to third, fourth grade, and that was it. And he wrote in several languages, not just English. And this one in English, that was a message he actually wrote backwards. And it says, my dear, sorry about the noise here, my dear friends of the fraternity, doctrine, good health, and place in God our Father. Let us learn the life in the love's law from instructions of Jesus Christ. Except this work, almost always in the earthly world, represent the struggle and studies of the vanity, thank you, the vanity, and from the darkness of the little man science. Very short, very profound. Thanks for helping. Even with glasses or no glasses, hard to read. Imagine he's doing that writing that backwards, not knowing any English. It's impossible to say that this man was a fake at any time. That was written by Emmanuel. So this is just some of the spirits that he was very receive works very proficiently. So Emmanuel, André Luiz, May, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes. That was he actually founded the Brazilian Spiritist Federation in late 1800s. Euripes Barçanufo, and so on. All of these are very, very, very known, and the content of their works is just phenomenal. Most work are Christian alike. Some works are very scientific, like André Luiz's work. Some of the works is very scientific. He brings concepts in some of his books that it's like it is really, really scientific. And some of the works by Emmanuel are like more evangelical, always, and this is a consistency throughout the entire work of Chico. They are all founded on the Spiritist doctrine. Always the works of Allan Kardec. It's very referenced throughout the whole entire collection, which is because of this terrific contribution that the Spiritism flourished in Brazil. And that's what we're doing here, right? We wanted to make sure that it's not received just for a number of people. It's so beautiful that we have the same power to do it here. And we're going to see here that Chico came to the United States in the 1950s, and that was one of the missions, to have Spiritism in the United States as we had in Brazil, so natural, so organic, and reaching people in the same level, because there is no frontiers, right? The love, fraternity, it's meant for us to be all together, to be all brothers and sisters. So evidence of mediumship with Jesus. So he had evangelical principles guided by Spiritism and faithfulness to Jesus in Kardec. Lessons of love. This is some of his legacy, right? Lessons of love and humility demonstrated to his way of living. Just like one of the things that, Jesus is really central for Spiritism as a model and guide, because Jesus is not just about religion, right? It doesn't matter what kind of religion that we choose for our lives. It is his example of life, his living, his acting, walking the walk, right? And bringing such a beautiful message of love that makes him so key and the center of our foundation of faith. Chico, even though he was very humble, he also lived by everything that he believed in. He lived a very, very humble life. He was definitely a very hardworking man. He had flaws like everybody else, but he was a man who lived and dedicated himself to others, and he dedicated himself for this work of Spiritism. Detachment from material goods and practice of true charity, moral, spiritual, and physical perseverance and discipline. Ability to love and bring peace to all he encountered. And we don't talk here. He had many illness. He had problems with his heart. He had problems with his eyes, like blind, legally blind. One eye. He had issues with several of his organs. He was always so sick. He had an excuse to be in bed half of his life and do nothing. He had a very good justification for that. But he chose to work. He chose to work no matter what. He worked most times 3 times than the average person would work. And those works was never for himself, it was always for others. Ability to love and bring peace to all he encountered. About Chico's work, let me read from here because it's kind of too little. And if I miss anything, help me out. Chico lived in a meager wages as a fingerprint expert with the Brazilian Agriculture Ministry before finally receiving his state pension. He lived his life as a true missionary, however, fulfilling his mediumship according to the most pure and elevated Christian precepts. Love your neighbors as well as your enemies, and give for free what has been received freely. He lived that life. He lived that life. We have that same precept here, and as an organization, we also don't charge anything. We do this place lives purely out of donation and the goodwill of everybody who works here. Just wrapping up, through Chico, Emmanuel told us materialism is a phenomenon that may dazzle some people and even assist them to achieve physical healing. Books, however, are our priority. Books represent the rain that fertilizes the immense soil, reaching millions of souls. My friends, I would like to ask that from now on, we dedicate our meetings to this purpose. His books sold an estimated 45 million copies. That's back then, that's much more now. The profits of which were all channeled into charitable organizations. And this is some of the facts about Chico. Xavier was one of Brazil's most popular figures, devoting his life to helping the poor and producing edifying, entertaining, and highly profitable bestsellers. Yet, despite his enormous popularity and record-breaking sales, he was a poor man. He never sought nor received a single payment, nor did he accept any credit for his books, for he said he did not write them. Discarnated Brazilian authors did. The books were not mine. They were property of those who wrote them through me. So he was considered one of the most respected mediums in Brazil, and he died on June 30, 2002. and had achieved the position of a great moral authority in a country where estimated 32 million people believed in Spiritism. That's how much Spiritism is growing. That's much more now. What he says about death. Thus, on his passing into the spiritual world, gently and sweetly, allowing his body to be calmed, he ascended towards the infinite being received by Jesus, who sheltered him with his goodness and assured him, "Rest for a while, my son, so as to forget the sadness of earth and enjoy the enchanting happiness of the celestial kingdom." And this was a message from the Spirit Joanna de Angelis regarding Chico, and it was on July 2nd, 2002. So it was just a couple of days after he had passed. This enlightened spirit came in to say he was received by Jesus. There is a lot of stuff about his work. He had 4 movies that were produced. Many books published, bestsellers. Was the Nosso Lar we talked about. Just the Nosso Lar was 2.5 million copies sold. And he had countless messages from discarnated spirits, continuous work to the last privilege on earth, and lived a modest life. This was when he came to the United States in 1965. He had a mission here. They established a foundation for Spiritism here in the United States. And he also had some cases in courtroom that the his mediumship, there are even some courtroom cases that were solved because they accepted the message from the spirits. So just they had like some murder trials that was even in TV. In one instance, he channeled a letter from a supposed murder victim, Mauricio Henriquez, in October 1979, that cleared the accused José Divino Nunes of any harmful intent. That was about two youngsters that, by mistake, one shot the other. They were just playing, and the family of the deceased sued the guy who killed their son, and Chico received the letter from the spirit who had passed. Please, there is no fault on him. He's a good friend. It was just an accident. Help him out. With this letter was good enough, and they took it, and the accused was cleared. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it something? So there is many more. I'm just gonna close with this slide. This is a very famous message from him. Although no one can return to the past and start anew, anyone can begin now to effect a new future. Chico, I strongly recommend that you look for any books on the on us here. In my own experience, I started with I'll mention the Nosso Lar was very enlightened books. There are about 13 books by André Luiz that describes the life in the spiritual world. Extremely down to earth, very, very like one-to-one conversation. Very good. The books from Emmanuel, if you enjoy Christianism, if you like history, if you like this powerful message of the gospel, he has a beautiful collection as well. So that's, there are many spiritual books out there, but those are like classics. You cannot call ourselves spiritists if we have not read a few of those books, and some of them, like in my case, I read repeatedly because it's so full of life and hope. Thank you so much. There are movies about some of these books are available. I think Livia mentioned that we're probably going to have one here, the Nosso Lar here, and thanks, and come again. I'll invite our friend out to do our vibrations.
No,
You have a question?
no question. I was going to wrap up, and then she's going to do the vibrations.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.